Okay, so I'd like to make a start on the Picado technique. The Picado is when you want to bring out part of the scale, a bit more melodic part, to bring out, because you could use tirando, which is just free stroke, but if it wants to come out more, it's a rest stroke technique. So this technique is a sort of it's just like walking. We want to be able to improvise with it as well as set scales. So there's various ways of playing picado. I mean, a lot of people play with more straight fingers. As a result of that, because the fingers wouldn't be the same length, the index and the middle are the primary fingers that are used. Some people use index and A, but index and middle are the normal, is the regular technique. So playing with straight fingers, obviously the length is different on the fingers, so people tend to play to the side as well to equalize the fingers. That's okay, some people play very fast like that. They end up sort of more to the side towards the bridge as they go down, which makes it a little bit difficult to recover and go back up the strings. So it's often better just to keep the same line when playing. And if you play with the more relaxed hand position, which is the one I favour, I used to play straight fingers years ago, but now I play more in the sort of natural way the hand falls. So you're just moving from the top, the big knuckle, and just one movement like this, which I'll go into detail in a minute. But the basic hand position is, if I was with the picking techniques, arpeggio, tremolo, and picado, tremolo, arpeggio, more or less the same, and they're free strokes, so the angle's different. It's playing away from the strings, and picado you want to play into the strings, so you just move back a bit like that until you reach a certain angle that facilitates the rest stroke. But I usually start by trying to get the arm position correct, and if you imagine there's a heavy bag, you put your arm in front of the guitar, pick up this heavy bag, which you wouldn't pick up in like this. You would use the whole arm, come up until the hand is about just over the strings. Then we can place the thumb on the sixth string and let the hand just relax and just hang from the thumb. Now, depending on the length of your arm, you'll probably find that the forearm is now resting on the edge of the guitar at some point, not the upper arm, because this would bring it too low here and it would be very difficult to get a good feel for the technique. So it does depend on the length of the arm. I've got quite long arms, so I end up resting on the forearm. Now if we balance the guitar using the forearm here, the thumb here, and let the hand hang. And the criteria I use is that if you're playing with a very relaxed hand, you see the fingers in a sort of a curved shape, both fingers, and that in a sense equalizes the length as well, because it's like doing this. So you've already got pretty much the same length with both fingers. So the criteria is that when the fingertip on the string, that once you've played the string that's being rested on and this middle joint are pretty much the same, even if you were thinking of the floor as a guide, so parallel with the floor. So both those, the end joint and the middle knuckle, are roughly the same height from the floor. So you wouldn't want it to be too much like that, because then it causes too much resistance on the string. And then if it's too much like this, then it's just not feasible. It's hard to get the finger through. So that's a good criteria. So when playing this, it's sort of simple, but it can lead to complications as well. I steer away from pressing and pulling and just think of a strike. So if we move the hand, if we're here with this, let's say the second string, so we have this level more or less with this from the ground, and the arm very comfortable here. Any adjustment you make with the hand, you use the whole arm to make the adjustment. Don't sort of just move from here. Just always move the whole thing. So now if we think of a striking, the best thing to do is to move the hand forward or down like this a little bit, and just think of tapping the middle and index on the guitar top, which one would do quite naturally. So often when this is happening, or if somebody's practicing like this, it's easy to think that when you hit the golpeador, or even if it's on a tabletop, or so it feels like it's easy to think that final hit is the string that you're striking, when in fact it would be the end. It's almost like the string you're landing on. So there's something in the way. Like if you imagine if you're doing this, let's just take one finger actually, because it's easier to look at it with one finger. So if Picado was only this fast, you probably would just use one finger. So, but because it's the reactive and it gets quite fast, then two are needed. But if you think of one to practice, and the middle is a good one to start with, you just lift the finger. It's always just hinging from here and coming straight down, just a strike. Now if I put my finger from my left hand, instead of get closer to that until the finger would hit that, would scrape, what would happen is the end of the middle finger would give way and then just continue on its journey. So if you just think of that, and then we put this finger in the way, that's quite a natural thing to do. The problem is, as soon as there's a string, one tends to want to pull, push, and all these complications come into the hand. So thinking of that tapping, we could then go lift the whole arm, keep in contact with the forearm on the edge of the guitar and the thumb here, sixth string for the moment. And then maybe place the index on the third string and just focus on the middle finger playing the top string. So we just do that tapping first on the string. Now if we imagine that finger had no give or no flexibility at the tip joint or the middle, and it was just a solid piece, like a solid wooden finger hinging only from here, then what would happen is we'd play down onto the string and there'd be no way to release from that string. So, and I've seen some lessons where they say press down on the string and just keep pressing down, but there's no talk of any release, which is strange. But so if you just kept pressing down, you had a solid finger that would just keep pressing and there'd be no release. So it's important to realize that this last piece, the last joint here, gives way. So as soon as you hit the resistance, rather than what normally happens is there's a push and if there's no give there, then what tends to happen is the whole hand lifts away from the guitar and the finger straightens out. That is to be avoided because that causes it's just too cumbersome. So we want to realize that there's less resistance on the end of the finger than there actually is on the string. So the first thing that happens is as you come down onto the string, I'm keeping the index here just so it's easier to see the middle finger. So as we come down to the string, there's sort of a giving way. There's a flex at that point, which means that this knuckle stays pretty much in the same position once the fingers come down onto the string. And then the finger finally, the first thing that would happen is if you're coming down onto the fingertip, then the first thing is the finger moves towards the nail. And then depending on the shape of the nail, hopefully it just glides straight through into the second string. And then at that moment, you've stopped pressing because it's over. So you'll see an impact on that second string, but then immediately relaxed. So it's very important that one stays pretty much the same. This leads to people thinking that, well, the movement's coming from this top big joint here, big knuckle, always playing down. But because of this final bit, where this stays pretty stable and this gives way and goes across, leads to people thinking that Picado can be played from just this joint, which is impossible. So it just would mean just playing like this and not even moving from here. So that's not even possible. And if you tried to do that, it would probably lead to a lot of stress and problems with the fingers. So it's just that you just think one movement from here, this stays, because the finger gives way, that pushes out slightly on this and keeps this knuckle stable, and then the finger just goes through. And the same thing with the index. It's just and again, it's just very easy to, when you lift the finger, it's very easy to open out the hand like that, which is usually the excuse for playing very close when you're playing slow, because otherwise the fingers flap around all over the place. But actually, if you keep the same shape of the finger, you can play bigger. It's the same movement. It's almost like a gear system. So if you play slowly, use a bigger movement. And as you go faster and relaxed, then the movement it's just the result of playing fast. The movement gets smaller, so you don't actually control the small movement. You just think of a nice walking, very even. So we'll get into that more in subsequent exercises about the separation. But for the moment, it's just this motion here. So I'm just going to do that a few times with the middle finger. So I'm going to tap first on the string, and then in slow motion, we let that end give way. So we need to be on the fingertip. That's important. And then it gives way. Immediately the finger starts to travel across, but you're still pushing downwards. So I'm just making an obvious sound on the nail there, so it goes onto the nail and then just flips across, and then it's over. So you end up with sort of an L shape in the finger. So important, this is what not to do. There's a levering out of the hand. That's a lot of pressure then, because there's a pushing. So it's striking and leaving the end very flexed, allowing it to flex as much as it needs. So it's almost exactly like this. And think of this tap here as the second string. So you want to make that first string, or the string you're playing, feel as much like the air, because somewhere in between here and the golpeador is the string. But obviously there's no resistance of any type here. But here there's a bit of string resistance. So for the moment you just do one finger, middle finger. So anyone wondering about the sound, obviously I've got this sponge, so I'm doing this quite late at night, so it's quite good to practice like that anyway. So you just get the physical sound, the motion, and you don't worry too much about the sound at this point. So hopefully that makes sense, and then we can leave the middle finger somewhere on a lower string and play the index in a similar fashion. So it's just worth getting used to that little bit, and just a little bit of this. Really thinking about that, all the things that I've mentioned here with the finger shape, and being careful not to do these, the pressure on these knuckles as you play. So no pushing or pulling, it's just a strike. And even if you are on the string, one thinks that a strike is always from a distance from the string, but in fact, if you are on the string, you can also strike from touching the string, because this flex, the finger will give way before the string has sufficiently moved. So that means that the flex is a bit of distance, so you could actually play from still on the string, just stationary, to suddenly like a quick jab, like a downward. So it's just basically not as much distance as this, but it's pretty much the same. It's very hard to hear the difference you'll hear. And so if we were doing index, the two fingers, I'll explain this in a subsequent video about the separation. That comes from an initial exercise. This is just to get the fundamentals of the hand position. So again, remember the level of the end joint once it's played the string, and this knuckle, this shouldn't be too low, because then you encounter a lot of resistance very early. So we want to be able to play maybe 2 or 3 strings comfortably from pretty much the same arm position. But I would still focus at the moment on maybe just the top string, just to get this. It's more important to get the movement right than start playing scales and things like that with this. So I hope you found this video useful, and there'll be another Picado lesson very shortly. Thanks for watching, see you soon.